So I'm talking about open data and specifically open data in education. I am Mr. Hay on Twitter if you want to follow me there. Krista mentioned the Callisto project that I am involved in. So callisto.ca and Callisto_Canada on Twitter if you want to check out that project. And so this is an example of what I'm using here is an example of a Jupyter notebook, which is very much what we've been doing with the Callisto project and using data and doing visualizations and such. So open data is data that are freely available to use and repurpose and all of those other verbs that we use with other things that are open. Usually open data are published by governments or by research institutions or sometimes by nonprofits or others. But similar to public data, open access, open science, it's basically these data sets that are available for us to make use of and to inspire us to share our data sets as well. And so the two sort of characteristics that we should have for open data is that they should, of course, be openly licensed and they should also be machine readable. I've seen a number of times where people have released particularly this happens with finance data that like, oh, we're being transparent. We're scanning every receipt and posting that on our website, which is not really an example of open data because it's not machine readable. There's no way to download the data and create a graph of expenditures or anything like that. So to be open data, it needs to be both openly licensed and in some sort of machine readable format, usually CSV or something along those lines. Now, we don't need to get too much into this, but the importance of data is for making good decisions and accountability and transparency and collaboration and innovation and all of those sorts of things are definitely things we want for data, or we want to use data for, and we talk about data-informed decision-making and all of those. Of course, we would have issues with data, both with open data specifically and with data in general. But with open data in particular, there are expenses related to collecting and publishing the data. And it's sometimes difficult to continue that. Sometimes people get very excited about publishing open data and then it doesn't get updated for 5 years, or there are issues with the accuracy of it or other things like that. Sometimes there might be concerns about stories that, how do we want to say that? Or stories that should come from the data, not the other way around, that people might have a particular story in mind and then they go to look for data that will support it. And could be some inappropriate purposes or other things like that. Potential lack of data literacy, and data literacy is one of the things we're definitely through the Callisto project trying to foster. And the Callisto project is primarily focused on grades 5 through 12 in education, but of course the resources are open to anybody to use. But data literacy is something that is very important here. And to one of the examples is, the relationship, or is something correlated or something caused. So there might be a data set here that's strongly correlated to another data set here, but we need to be literate in whether that's actually one is causing the other, those sorts of things. All right, some places where we can find open data. There's a Wikipedia article about open data in Canada. Canada has an open data portal where government data are housed. Alberta has an open data portal. Many municipalities have open data portals. So Edmonton, and then I'm in Strathcona County, east of Edmonton here. Those both have open data portals. It has all sorts of cool things like, how all of the councillors voted on all of these different things, and the location and species of every tree on public property. All sorts of interesting data are available for us to make use of and maybe find some stories from the data. And so we can search through this. Yes, BC has an open data portal. Vancouver has an open data portal, and all of those sorts of things. Absolutely. Spurious correlations. Thank you. I love that site. That the number of movies per year that Nicolas Cage stars in is strongly correlated with the number of drownings in home swimming pools, things like that. But you can browse through these data portals and you find cultural or political or financial data sets that are very interesting to look at. Using open data, this is, again, is an example of a Jupyter notebook here. And maybe I can even get out of slideshow view. A Jupyter notebook has text interspersed with computer code. And I'm running this off the internet here, so it's running a little slower maybe, but we can look at consumer price index changes from the Alberta Open Data portal. We can, just with a few lines of Python code, we can import the data. And so this was a URL from the Alberta Open Data portal about consumer price index changes. And so we get this long data set. It's got 3,000 rows or 3,500 rows with 5 columns. And then we can make a visualization of it and see that looking specifically at what year or the month December 2020, what changes were there. And so we've got Alberta and Canada. If we wanted to look just at Alberta, we can see that data set. So there's a negative 4% change in the price index for clothing and footwear. Education, recreation, and reading. There was an increase in the consumer price index. And is that 7 minutes already? Okay, so, and then we can do some other visualizations, including some animated visualizations that are lots of fun. We can find some maps. And then just a reminder that in education, we produce open data often, in K-12, it's often related to enrollment and provincial testing results. But we should definitely be using open data for real world learning when we're teaching students about data literacy, about data visualization, and all of that. And then my contact information, that didn't quite render properly, david.hay@eips.ca. That's Elk Island Public Schools that I work for. Again, I mentioned Twitter, or if you're interested in the Callisto project, you can send an email there as well. So that's a super quick overview to open data. And I guess hopefully we have a minute or two for some questions if anybody is interested.